Hello, welcome to another edition of the Pace Report. I'm Brian Pace, reporting live here at Creole Jazz and Supper Club here in Harlem, New York. Tonight on the band stage, you're going to witness Miss LaVerne Butler, whose latest HighNote Records release, Love Lost and Found Again, is doing very well on the jazz charts. And for 10 years, she's made a career overseas, and she's now coming back, and she's reintroducing her music and her voice to new fans here and also in Canada. We sat down earlier and we talked about this brand new album. We talked about her roots growing up in Louisiana. Also, we talked about one of her mentors, the great Jon Hendricks, who really encouraged her to move to New York City to pursue her music of jazz music. So sit back, relax, and enjoy the sounds of Miss LaVerne Butler, live here at Creole Jazz and Supper Club here in Harlem.
Oh, heaven, I'm in heaven. And my heart is so that I can hardly speak. And I seem to find the happiness I see when we're out together dancing cheek to cheek. Oh, heaven, I'm in heaven. And the years that come around me through the week seem to vanish like a gambler's lucky streak. When we're out together dancing cheek to cheek. Oh, I love to climb a mountain and to reach the highest peak, but it doesn't thrill me half as much as dancing cheek to cheek. Yes, I love to go out fishing in a river or a creek, but I don't enjoy it half as much as dancing cheek to cheek. I come and dance with me. I want my arms around you. The charms about you will carry me through to heaven. I'm in a heaven, and my heart beats so that I can hardly speak. And I seem to find the happiness that I seek. Yeah, when we're out together dancing cheek to cheek.
Congratulations on your brand new CD on HighNote Records. It's doing very well on the jazz charts right now. It's getting a lot of play here in New York City on WBGO. And what took you so long? You've been away for a little while.
Yes, I've been working overseas a lot, doing the traveling back and forth and doing hotels and clubs, mostly in Asia. And I think pretty much for the last 8 years, you know, and that's pretty much what I've been doing, Brian.
And you're back with this brand new record on HighNote Records, and you've got Bruce Barth accompanying you, and he's been with you for quite a while, and you got the legendary Houston Person on saxophone on this.
That's right. I've got a really, really good group behind me. I feel very comfortable with Bruce because, yes, he's done, I think this is our third record together that he produced. He didn't produce this one, but he produced my previous two and also accompanied me. So, yes, and I've known him, since the 90s. So, yes. Mm-hmm.
Tell me about the concept of this record and some of the material that you dive into. I mean, it seems like this album, when you put it on, it's just a feel-good CD. You can play this while you're cooking, you can play this while you're vacuuming, and you can play this while you're just sitting back, curling up, reading a nice book.
Well, I'm glad that you said that because it's difficult sometimes to gauge how people perceive an album. You know, everybody's got a different ear, and I kind of wanted it to be that kind of album. I think Wayne Winborn also wanted it to be that kind of album. He produced it. And I think it is that kind of, you know, sort of general, easygoing, but also very upbeat. So we were able to sort of cover a spectrum of things and still get the kind of jazz sound that we were looking for. Mm-hmm.
It never left you. I mean, I think this album is kind of refreshing in the sense that, piggybacking on what you said, I mean, every now and then, you know, what's happening now with today's jazz vocalists, both male and female, it seems like the record companies want them to do concept records instead of the artists letting them breathe and letting them put new life into songs they want to record.
That is true, I think, part of the time. I have been pretty fortunate that, you know, the record companies that I've dealt with have sort of allowed me to select a lot of the material myself and sort of have some input on what I've recorded. But yes, it can be the other way around as well, you know, depending on who it is that's producing and who you're signed with. You know, everybody has their own ideas, so you just go with the flow, you know.
What are some of your favorite tracks on this CD?
Oh, I like Sweet Pumpkin. My goodness, I like Traveling Light, which is an oldie but goodie. Any Place I Hang My Hat is Home is a nice one. There are quite a few on there. I like the whole album, you know. I didn't really have a lot of time to prepare the material, so I can't say that a lot of those songs have grown on me over the years. They're pretty much new to my repertoire, but I enjoyed doing them. I did.
The days of wine and roses, laugh and run away, like a child at play, through the meadowland toward a closing door. I go home nevermore. That wasn't there before. The lonely night is closing, just a passing place, filled with memories of a lonely smile that introduced me to the days of wine and roses and of wine roses, laugh and run away. Oh, just like a child at play, through the meadowlands toward a closing door. Outdoor, more, never ever more. That was there before. All alone. Night discloses just a passing breeze, filled with memories of a golden child that introduced me to the days of wine and roses and you.
LaVerne, you were raised in Shreveport, Louisiana, and by the South, your father had a very, very important impact on your life to pursue music.
Well, he was a music teacher and a jazz musician himself, a saxophonist. So we grew up with the sounds of Ray Charles and Dizzy Gillespie and all the greats. So I have to say that it was sort of part of what we listened to as children, you know, and yes, I think that he is, for that reason, he is a major influence. And also my grandmother, his mother, was also a major influence in music for me.
Speaking of, you know, your musical influences, well, who's some of the people that you grew up listening to? Because you grew up in the soul era, but you assisted doing some really serious blues and jazz.
As a kid, I listened to a lot of R&B because Daddy played a lot of R&B in the house. When I left home and went to university, I started listening to Nancy Wilson, all the great male vocalists, and just sort of from there developed my own ear as to what I kind of wanted to do as a vocalist. So I sort of, you know, combined Carmen and Ella and Nancy and all these great vocalists, and they were who I listened to first, and then male vocalists as well, you know, later.
It was at the University of New Orleans where you decided that you really wanted to pursue music, but you ended up getting a degree in English and you ended up becoming a teacher.
Yes, I did, and I think that was my mother wanted me to do that, and I really wasn't really wild about it. I really wanted to study acting, if you want to know. So I couldn't, they didn't want to support me doing the acting thing. So, well, okay, so why don't you at least get something you could fall back on? So I went along with the teaching English, and now I don't regret it. I'm glad that I did. You know, it was a good idea.
Also, a gentleman by the name of Mr. Jon Hendricks also played a very, very important part in your life. In fact, it was about 83, 84 he decided to encourage you to move to New York City to pursue your music.
Yes, I met John in New Orleans, and he was with Lambert, Hendricks, and Ross, the revised Lambert, Hendricks, and Ross at the time, at the Blue Room, and I met him there. And I think he came actually to one of my gigs and heard me sing, and we just sort of developed a relationship from then and kept in touch. And he said, you really need to move to New York, because that's where and I was scat singing a lot more then than I'm doing now. And he says, you need to move to New York because there's going to be more of a possibility for you to blossom as a vocalist, as a jazz vocalist, and especially a bebop jazz vocalist. So I moved to New York, and here I am.
What were some of the things that you started to do when you moved to New York City as far as cutting your teeth? Because from what I understand, and I think we talked about this a couple of weeks ago, when you moved to New York, you ended up going overseas to really kind of craft your voice as well as your voice.
Me and a whole lot of other singers were going overseas, I think, because there were opportunities there. There was more money there, and I think I'm just one of several that were going back and forth and doing, not just in Asia, but in other parts of Europe as well. You know, there's more of they're more receptive. And they're willing to, I would say, respect artists a little bit more. They're more open, and they still are, I think. So I think I wasn't the only one. I was just one of several that were doing that back and forth. I just decided to do a little longer than everybody else.
LaVerne, would you say there's a distinct difference between the jazz fans overseas versus here in the United States? Because here at the jazz clubs here in New York and also the other major cities, people do pay good money to see people like yourself, but overseas there seems to be a whole nother understanding of the Great American Songbook as well as how they appreciate music.
Yes, I think some of that has to do with the whole glamour thing of having someone come from a different country as well. You know, they like having imported artists to come to their country. It's much more glamorous than having a local. And so that's part of it, I think. But also, jazz is an American art form, and they want to hear that true American art form sound that is not part of their musical history. You know, and that's what American musicians provide, jazz musicians.
Whoa, I'm traveling light because my man is gone. So from now on, I'm traveling light. He said goodbye. Whoa, and took my heart away. But from today, guess I'm traveling light. No one to see. Free as the breeze. No one but me. And all my memories. Some lucky night, he will come back again. Oh, but until then, until then, yes, I'm traveling light.
LaVerne, what does jazz music mean to you?
That's a hard question. I think it is a music that allows me to be free with my interpretation of a song. And it gives me the freedom to do something a little different with the melody each time I sing it without changing the whole song. And I don't think that you can get that in pop music. You know, in pop music or opera, it has to be done a certain way. And jazz gives me that freedom to be an artist, to explore all the musical concepts of what I can do as a vocalist. And I think that's what jazz means to me, a freedom.
That'll do it again for another edition of the Pace Report. I'm Brian Pace, reporting live here at Creole Jazz and Supper Club here in Harlem, New York. I'd like to personally thank Miss LaVerne Butler for her time, as well as the staff and management here at Creole. As always, please visit my website, www.thepacereport.com, for my weekly column as well as my past segments. Until next time, remember, if it's in the groove, it'll make you move. Till next time, peace.
Go out fishing in a river or a creek.